Misty says, belay that. Team numbers not balanced.
Arco says, I'm the weakest one, I tell you earlier.
Untouchable Heart says, it's been 15 minutes almost, can we play one round?
Raylan says, Blue's motto should be, today is a good day to die.
Misty says, Caddy to Red.
Hamdi says, lag in time. Let's start.
Eve says, there is nothing about you that is not weak socks. So, why not your wrist? Is just part of the overall system. Eve nods.
Misty says, Caddy to Blue, sorry.
Untouchable Heart says, no thank you.
Raijin says, no thank you, red period.
Misty says, Blue, please choose one red.
Hamdi says, feel like at moon where time is so slow.
Eve says, is time slower on the moon?
Misty says, Hamdi 7777, Hamdi 777, to Red.
Raijin says, that's his BS. Laughing out loud.
Misty says, Hamdi 7777, Hamdi 777, to Blue.
Untouchable Heart says, it's 9v9.
Hamdi says, not sure movement is slow, so maybe time 2 laughs.
Untouchable Heart says, good God. Eve says, well.
Hamdi says, shit he he he.
Untouchable Heart says, now 10v8. Laughing out loud.
Tiberiu says, bitch. Raylan says, start and fix it next round.
Eve says, I think the lack of gravity makes up and down look slower.
Raylan says, laughing out loud.
I'm but says, came here.
Eve says, but time is likely similar.
Misty says, Chrissy Etheria, to Blue.
Untouchable Heart says, rage back. Eve says, to a very small fraction of difference. Untouchable Heart says, to Red. Eve says, according to Einstein.
Raijin says, ahaha.
Eve says, but you know Einstein.
Raylan says, no, I want Raijin.
Eve says, he is mostly full of shit. Untouchable Heart says, no.
Hamdi says, whose idea is that?
Untouchable Heart says, I had dibs first.
Raylan says, although it's fun bubbling her too. Laughing out loud. Tiberiu says, no, what about?
I'm but says, Misty give Kane a color.
Misty says, Chrissy Etheria, Blue.
Untouchable Heart says, almost 20 minutes, not one round.
Raijin says, lol.
Misty says, Chrissy?
Raijin says, Raylan, you lucky now.
Eve says, well, it gets me drunker, which is dangerous for all. Eve goes for another beer. Untouchable Heart says, 8v11. Even better now.
Raylan says, actually I count 12 over here. Laughing out loud.
Misty says, Chrissy Etheria, I change your to Red.
Walt says, let's start.
Misty says, Caddy back to red.
Untouchable Heart says, haha.
Aimbat says, Afessezoret.
Eve says, we are pretty badass though. So let's go.
Raijin says, laughing out loud.
Eve says, I am ready.
Misty says, mark teams.
Raylan says, mark in her purple.
Misty says, starting in 5.
Raijin says, ahaha, soon your ass, Raylan, aha.
Misty says, welcome Freery. I will get you in the next Ruand.
Raijin says, and get confused, I'm red okay.
Misty says, asterisk round. Freery says, all okay. Thanks to have noticed me, I am very late. Misty says, everyone please start showing up on time. Late arrivals delay the first round for everyone.
Untouchable Heart says, or if they are not one time, they can wait. Like we all did for 20 minutes.
Wild says, why wait to start? Latecomers can always join next round.
Misty says, Freery to blue.
Raylan says, yeah, I fully expected to be slid in after a round was run on when I showed you IP. Not a big deal.
Misty says, Freery? Freery says, yes?
Raylan says, come blue.
Misty says, mark teams.
Arco says, there is lag. Wild says, I always get killed in 5 seconds of the first round I join, so no difference.
Misty says, starting in 5.
Aimbot says, yay.
Alvaro says, Misty, you should put everyone on the red team.
Aimbot says, Napoli scored yay.
Misty says, starting in 5.
Raylan says, Napoli?
Freery says, yeah, the big battle.
Hamdi says, let use some time to enjoy whining.
Misty says, test it to blue. Tessa says, sorry, not quite set up yet. Pocahontas says, just for a record, I will restart next time after getting arrows before start of a round as this last one.
Untouchable Heart says, I don't see ball.
Tessa says, let me step out and get settled.
Untouchable Heart says, on night.
Friri says, all okay, the red team is weak. Chrissy says, WTF purrs, you want to see Knight's balls.
Untouchable Heart says, you WTF.
Tiberius says,
Friri says, nah.
Raylan face bombs.
Eve says, on a rack.
Mila says, IH.
Eve sharpens knife.
Raylan says, y'all drunk already, I guess.
Eve says, yup.
Aimbot says, ghoul.
Friri says, best line ever, Raylan. Misty says, king to blue. Tia says, tau meanies. Misty says, Tia to red. Pocahontas says, hey Tia.
Tiberius says, if I get my hand on that tinny panther. Raijin says, hello.
Misty says, mark teams.
Untouchable Heart says, finally.
Misty says, starting in 5.
Eve says, woot.
Tiberiu says, nothing. Try to help you and got full suing.
Misty says, starting in 5. Freery says, too funny how some people hit like 3 hits in a second, ahaha.
Knight says, who?
Freery says, look at the logs. Misty says, Arco, are you sitting out? Picahota says, those are machine bows.
Marja says, everything is funny here with the lag.
Raijin says, sometime there is the lag, so not count or look the log.
Freery says, I really don't care because in real fight that would be O over a haha. Tessa says, okay, should be good now.
Knight says, 2 arrows in a second is possible, not 3.
Freery says, 13 kitty face 5:16 ZCS untouchable heart resident, hit you with EQ hashtag Marley Claws 3.20 pickaxe. 40%. Type, sword. 13 kitty face 5:16 or Elven sword draw 2.30, drawn. 13 kitty face 5:16 LR Elven sword draw 2.30, slow stance. Delay 0.65, range 2.80.
13 Kitty Face 5-16 ez Eldar Bonovo 202, Gold Sheeted.
13 kitty face 5:16 LR Elven sword draw 2.30, fast stance. Delay 0.55, range 2.50. 13 kitty face 5:17 ZCS untouchable heart resident, hit you with EQ hashtag Marley Claws 3.20 pickaxe. 40%. Type sword. 13 kitty face 5:7 LR Elven sword draw 2.30, melee hit on untouchable heart resident. 13 kitty face 5:17 ZCS untouchable heart resident, hit you with EQ hashtag Marley Claws 3.20 pickaxe. 40%. Type sword. 13 kitty face 5:70 untouchable heart resident captured Freery resident. Misty says, Mila Lokita, Milikateka to blue. Freery says, but all good.
Eve says, 3 are totally possible with lag.
Freery says, ahaha.
Eve says, or more.
Freery says, you sure?
Luck.
Chrissy says, do people feel a difference in lag compared to other weeks? Freery says, asterisk.
Raijin says, for me is the same.
Untouchable Heart says, still laggy for me.
Mila says, UPS, sorry.
Freery says, ahaha.
Mila says, was reading.
Freery says, let's go, we don't care. Misty says, mark teams. Picahota says, no mood walk. Still. Chrissy says, Rygene, you shouldn't try to play it on a 100 years old PC, laughing out loud.
Eve says, Untouchable Heart is who we call Purse.
Purse is not cheating.
You lost.
Friri says, sure.
Mila says, a bit laggy but playable, as Vok used to be, winky face.
Eve says, is all.
Friri says, ahaha.
Untouchable Heart says, LMAO. Eve says, lag can make the logs look bad. Untouchable Heart says, story of my life.
Misty says, belay that.
Tiberiu says, slaps Eve.
Untouchable Heart says, they fail to win a fight then cry.
Friri says, you sure. Tessa says, which team would be good to hop on?
Rygene says, laughing out loud, I know.
Eve says, well, I know.
Rygene says, but I'm good also with this.
Eve says, so I am not concerned with your opinion if you disagree.
Friri says, let's go, I don't care if cheat. Misty says, Tessa to Red.
Eve says, fair enough.
Knight says, I revenge for you. I will shoot 4 in a second. Rygene says, Furl, before talk make proof not this shit in the lag.
Friri says, aha, let's have fun. Some cheat. Some are honest.
Raylan says, you can always get in 2 hits within 0.7 seconds, so you can easily see 3 hits in a matter of 17 to 18 example. 17:01, 17:08, 18:05.
Tia says, marks the teams again.
Untouchable Heart says, bitch is on crack. Laughing out loud.
Friri says, let's all fight.
Hamdi says, oh my god.
Eve says, you can't cheat enough to beat Purrs.
Knight says, let's go have fun.
Eve says, so. Good luck.
Misty says, Tessa your tag please. Friri says, I don't know, let's see after.
Knight says, Friri said let's go, so let's go.
Eve says, let's just play.
Friri says, let's go.
Eve says, and stop accusing of people of nonsense.
Friri says, yeah. Don't care, I put the logs and I don't care. Tia says, hurry, we are getting slapped, smiley face. Friri says, story of her life. Laughing out loud.
Eve says, the logs are meaningless. As I told you.
Friri says, okay, sure. Let's go.
Hamdi says, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Knight says, she just made a point. Did not to make a fuss, let's go.
Eve says, if you can't understand that.
Friri says, do and care. Let's fought.
Eve says, then you are just dumb. Let's play.
Friri says, I'm dumb. Come and fight.
Rygene says, we know.
Untouchable Heart says, good God, Misty.
Hamdi says, okay, we can make circle and watch them fight, laughs.
Aimbot says, I am so fed of this shit before playing a game.
Untouchable Heart says, 3 rounds in 42 minutes. Eve says, start the game before we imploda.
Misty says, mark teams.
Knight says, let's forgive Eve. She can't speak good humble language.
Eve says, even I am close to losing it.
Aimbot says, Misty, you stupid retard.
Tiberiu says, don't come between me and EVPU Tixus, we will slayo.
Tessa says, had too many things on, I think we are good now. Misty says, starting in 5.
Romeo says, easy PPL.
Friri says, nice. Ja Romeo. I love how they are fair play to down me at 2 against me. Good work, girls, laughing out loud. Next time be 3 ahaha.
Raijin says, 1 is a knot.
Hamdi says, was 4 or 5 against me hee hee.
Friri says, not really, just reading my logs.
Eve says, you know what shows character. Losing without whining.
Hamdi says, you kidding, we are 9 and red 11. Oh my god.
Friri says, hey, they put a stupid laugh while they were downing me.
Hamdi says, that lag of mind.
Friri says, so that's okay, but that's just cringe ahaha. Misty says, Chrissy to blue.
Eve says, well, they may have been amused. So there is that.
Arco says, much lag to move.
Untouchable Heart says, this must be Alexei. Only he cries like a lil bitch.
Friri says, so even if they win, they are like lame and all is okay ahahaha.
Untouchable Heart says, haha. Eve says, it's maybe someone else.
Friri says, me?
Eve says, whoever it is.
Friri says, nah. Tia says, I thought I was walking, but I was running laughing out loud.
Untouchable Heart says, for sure. Laughing out loud. Eve says, I don't care.
Aimbot says, my meter HUD doesn't show up.
Friri says, you surely know me, but well, only in raids.
Eve says, lol.
Misty says, mark teams.
Eve says, well then shut it.
Aimbot says, I go reset to LRTP me back.
Friri says, and I do and care here, it's just fun.
Eve says, you should know better.
Aimbot says, TP.
Misty says, starting in 5.
Untouchable Heart says, clearly you do. You have made it obvious to everyone. Laughing out loud.
Friri says, so don't hesitate to put lame luas or anything ridiculous. I really don't care.
Marge says, take flag aim.
Raijin says, 10 stop call cheat.
Friri says, well, I put the logs 240% in a second, that's not normal. I don't care here, in raid that would be different.
Mila says.
Eve says, yeah, there you would get your butt raped, or should.
Aimbot says, I said I go reset it LR and you start the game.
Friri says, all okay, Eve.
Aimbot says, Misty, you really come here to piss off people.
Friri says, and Idy's funny you say that, laughing face.
Arco says, when I pick the flag, it make me too lag is glag, is heavy weight laughing out loud.
Misty says, Marja Tia to blue. Tia says, ah. Misty says, Arco to red. Tia says, I'm not shooting at anyone over here, then laughing out loud. Misty says, Friri to red. Friri says, surprisingly.
Eve says, many of us play capture the flag 7 days a week for 2 to 3 hours.
Friri says, no.
Eve says, we know each other.
Friri says, not with them, please.
Eve says, and I know Purs is not cheating. She's just good.
Friri says, give them Hamdyke, he is good.
Eve says, so deal with it. And shut it. Untouchable Heart says, I don't have to cheat. No need for it.
Friri says, sure.
Untouchable Heart says, he's mad he missed 3 shots. Like the noob he is.
Tia says, okay, I fight for blue. Friri says, fuck okay.
Hamdi says, it's so funny here, it's like circus.
Untouchable Heart says, truth hurts. Eve says, MHM.
Misty says, mark teams.
Knight says, don't keep talking on same subject. Raijin says, burn ass.
Eve says, I actually enjoy the drama anymore.
Becky says, those teams are not balanced and every one of you know it. Misty has no clue what she is doing.
Eve says, that is far I digressed.
Friri says, I feel dirty.
Mila says, or a reformatory.
Raylan says, I'm just mad I was jumped by 5 women that round.
Misty says, starting in 5.
Raijin says, shower. Raylan says, no wait, am I though?
Tessa says, damn, the second life capture the flag chat gets spicy LMAO. Tia says, I protect all of blue now, Corey too.
Raijin says, you are lucky, Raylan, when 5 women come to jumps in you.
Hamdi says, really a circus. Hee hee.
Friri says, you well done to you.
Eve says, it remains fun though, because I enjoy your all's company in this craziness. Lol.
Raijin says, for real you come here for have fun or for broke some balls?
Eve says, plus I am high and drink.
Friri says, nice.
Hamdi says, that why it's funny.
Eve says, asterisk drunk. So that helps.
Friri says, continue.
Untouchable Heart says, just call him Alexney.
Raijin says,
Untouchable Heart says, haha.
Raijin says, 13 hours, 59 minutes, and 41 seconds. ZCS, game, Friri resident reset their meter.
Untouchable Heart says, oh shit. Reset.
Raijin says, 2 times in.
Untouchable Heart says, LMAO.
Hamdi says, first choice is what color?
Untouchable Heart says, finally killed one.
Raijin says, yellow. Raylan says, no meaning to do whatever it takes. New asterisk.
Misty says, starting in 5.
Raylan says, I didn't Jewy that round. How about you, Rajin?
Hamdi says, yay. Wait.
Raylan says, slash Mr. Grins.
Eve says, Raylan is bad.
Friri says, well done.
Marja says, I got a lot of my arrows back on me.
Raylan says, be right back.
Freery says, really?
Marge says, yep, but no hits gladly.
Misty says, starting in 5.
Arco says, now red team not angry with me.
Marge says, has anyone experienced that? Hit by your own arrow? Is it pushable?
Freery says, why? And who are you? Sharambilam, I want to fight, but I'm red, so I stink. Misty says, it is possible at times of arrow res lag if you get ahead of where you shot the arrow before the arrow reses. And it does happen. Freery says, sure like sword anytime possible with lag.
Eve says, loser.
Hamdi says, see you in next circus on Monday.
Freery says, ahaha.
Eve says, lol.
Freery says, it's capture the flag girls, all okay.
Raijin says, see a Hamdi in the next bubble.
Eve says, later Hamdi.
Misty says, Eve to blue. Freery says, laughing out loud.
Raylan says, I'm back.
Corlink says, thanks for the capture the flag, thanks Misty. Freery says, the fun is back.
Raijin says, welcome back.
Socrates says, arrow scripts are programmed not to allow the arrows they are in to hit the owners.
Tia says, circus music laughing out loud.
Raylan says, Aw by Cora.
Hamdi says, 2 was away from keyboard some changes with no clean WTF so funny.
Socrates says, if you receive a hit from your own arrow, then it's probably not compliant with ZCS.
Friri says, Hamdi all okay, we have fun. Tia says, how can you shoot yourself SC? Sock. Misty says, drive 2 to blue.
Eve says, does this mean I have to defend the Friri dude?
Friri says, nice, I can't stand drive 2.
Eve peers about.
Drive says, just watching.
Hamdi says, me too, really, that why I play but need drunk mode to understand what happening their laughs.
Raijin says, Coem drive.
Socrates says, it's not possible if you use fully compliant ZCS arrows.
Raijin says, I'm here for kick your ass.
Tessa says, I'm just here with the default free bow vibing TBH.
Eve says, seems not. All good.
Friri says, I have fill a complaint for everyone, be ready.
Eve says, hee hee.
Misty says, drive 2? Are you there?
Aimbot says, I am done, good night.
Tia says, eats some candy and wants to hear more circus music.
Raijin says, good night, daughter.
Eve says, I have no idea what I happening, Hamdi. I am drunk. And high.
Aimbot says, the fun OIS tomorrow.
Eve says, and there is some dude named Friri.
Friri says, perfect, so now you know.
Eve says, being an ass.
Friri says, I'm to a dude.
Eve says, is all I know.
Friri says, look at my stats.
Eve says, aside of that, all good.
Friri says, Thule, they are not good. Misty says, mark teams.
Eve smiles sweet.
Hamdi says, ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta hee hee.
Misty says, starting in 5. Belay that.
Eve says, chick?
Raylan says, no.
Eve says, I have not looked at your Avi. Just assumed based on how much nonsense.
Friri says, I jave a huge penis BTWW.
Eve says, you were a dude.
Tia says, here they come. Friri says, I have told myself I am not.
Eve says, good luck with that.
Friri says, but the white penis still remains.
Eve says, become one with self.
Misty says, Red, please congregate at your base.
Raylan says, why did Tib run over here? Laughing out loud.
Eve says, is all you can do.
Raijin says, some are morons.
Untouchable Heart says, what is this capture the flag? A fucking nightmare. Eve says, lol.
Marco says, what happened?
Eve says, poor purrs.
Freery says, what happened?
Eve says, lol.
Raylan says, why do we belay the start?
Untouchable Heart says, delay.
Tia says, I don't know, but you came over to our side.
Untouchable Heart says, what is happening? Eve says, I dunno.
Misty says, Tessa, Evelyn.Aurora, to blue.
Eve says, I am on blue. And drunk. Untouchable Heart says, 8 games AL day. Eve says, all I know. Untouchable Heart says, oh, Eve. Eat a sandwich.
Chrissy says, Purrs should be blue. Tia says, we are mystified. Misty says, mark teams.
Raijin says, no. Thank you.
Untouchable Heart says, I like it on red with rage.
Raijin says, yes, she is red, period.
Chrissy says, okay, Purrs and Raijin should be blue.
Untouchable Heart says, okay.
Misty says, starting in 5.
Untouchable Heart says, laughing out loud.
Drive says, everyone kill Raijin.
Raijin says, drive I kill you. Raylan says, I caged her for you, Drive.
Untouchable Heart says, Ray.
No. You.
Tiberiu says, what? Raijin says, haha, before you need try it.
Drive says, sweet.
Untouchable Heart says, now you're dead, Ray. Laughing out loud.
Raijin says, Aha.
Eve says, oh.
Raylan says, I may take her for myself, though. She's cute in a cage. Tiberius says, come here, Ray.
Untouchable Heart says, I will remove your face, Ray. Laughing out loud.
Raijin says, Elmeo am really cute, not in cage.
Eve says, lol.
Chrissy says, just sit on it, it will make everything better. Misty says, starting in 5. Freery says, I love those fights.
Arco says, oh, got the flag and reach, but...
Freery says, see Unfadable Beardy? Raylan is good and cool.
Drive says, Elle thinks she would look great in a cage, Raylan.
Untouchable Heart says, okay, Alexny.
Tessa says, on my way back.
Raylan says, what the hell was that, Eve? That was hilarious.
Eve says, I thought they were dead. Lol. I was going to aid you.
Raylan says, LMAO, I thought you were hiding in my bubble, then going to jump them. Laughing out loud.
Freery says the good stinky ones were on you. Sorry.
Eve says, no. I was totally clueless. Lol.
Raijin says, haha, you blind, Eve.
Eve says, you were standing still.
Raylan says, I love how Eve proves she's drunk and high. Laughing out loud.
Misty says, Danielle Sparky Queen 1 to blue.
Eve says, and I register still hitboxes as dead. But you were not dead. Lol. As I soon found out.
Tia says, my arrow's going through hitboxes. Misty says, mark teams.
Eve says, no one is cheating here. I know it is hard to trust. But I feel I can tell. And I can tell you.
Friri says, not sure but okay.
Eve says, no one is. Just saying. No one is cheating. Lol.
Friri says, you sure? OFC.
Eve says, there are levels of skill.
Friri says, hoo. Misty says, starting in 5. Freddy says, Jaja.
Raylan says, hi as Danny.
Eve says, you will find out if you play enough.
Friri says, sure. Laughing out loud. Valkyrie says, "Oh no, we lost again." Misty says, "Starting in 5.
Eve says, lol.
Tia says, "Thank you, I have to go, was pretty fun."
Raylan says, "I'll see y'all later, Tia."
Eve says, Nini Tia.
Raijin says, "Nini."
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Tia says, "Sorry, I have work later and have to do some things before I log." Thank you all, meanies laughing out loud kiss.
Mila says, "Hi Spartacus."
Spartacus says, "Hi, thanks."
Chrissy says, "Eve is not in a cage 7v4? But that's not really." Oops. 7-4.
Eve says, "Gah. I thought I was all badass." Eve pouts. Untouchable Heart says, "I see 8v8. Eve says, "Teams were even. I just lost. Lol."
Knight says, I am leaving.
Socrates says, I'm Spartacus.
Eve says, "Oh? You are Mad Knight?" And socks.
Freery says, Tiat was even. Good job, everyone.
Knight says, no, why am I mad?
Eve says, "I dunno."
Freery says, Kink, you did well.
Socrates says, you're supposed to say you're Spartacus.
Eve says, "Sounded abrupt."
Pikahotas says, who bind Misty.
Eve says, "So I was worried."
Rygene says, go.
Eve says, "If not, all good."
Misty says, starting in 5.
Eve says, "Good night, night."
Chrissy says, fix teams maybe?
Knight says, good night all.
Eve says, "All I know is you are no Spartacus socks."
Knight says, Eve.
Mila says, do we have you a team for Spartacus?
Rygene says, yes, Bubble Tea. Team.
Eve says, "I didn't bind Misty." And stop blaming me for stuff just 'cause I am drunk. Eve swats it all.
Chrissy says, "Are we changing team or should I leave now?"
Marja says, well, I leave you now late anyway.
Untouchable Heart says, band Eve. Eve says, did we lose? Untouchable Heart says, overly intoxicated.
Raijin says, no Eve.
Friri says, ban Unflatable Beauty.
Eve says, yay. Untouchable Heart says, remix. But Rage on my team.
Misty says, Spartacus, Proofstriker, red.
Eve says, Ragens but is on my team. You can have other half.
Socrates says, I'm Spartacus.
Raijin says, not touch my butt.
Eve says, lol.
Friri says, inflatable ego. Misty says, Birgit Birgidiolson, Romeo, Romeo.Darcy, blue.
Eve says, I have my friends. So I don't need to inflate my ego.
Tessa says, y'all can't be taking janky Second Life capture the flag seriously.
Raijin says, you can do happy now.
Eve says, you should try it.
Einseiz, die Stern.
Friri says, friends are overrated.
Eve says, nope. They are everything. Learn that now. It will help you.
Friri says, don't care.
Eve says, then life will be hard.
Friri says, life is hard laughing out loud.
Eve says, good luck.
Chrissy says, I don't believe you, Eve. You need to inflate your floating bed to float on your pool. Friri says, if you believe in inflatable ego, yeah, it will be for you. I'm pretty much cool with my real life girl.
Eve says, okies. I wasn't worried about you. Untouchable Heart says, are we done?
Friri says, you just wish me good luck, but okay, I don't care at all.
Eve says, just offering advice. Untouchable Heart says, or are we fighting?
Friri says, nice inflatable boobs, let's fight.
Eve says, I find you annoying.
Raylan says, Evidently, there are more moves being made.
Eve says, so, I am doing my best to have fun with you here.
Friri says, cool Eve. Chrissy says 5 to 9.
Untouchable Heart says, when? Next year? Eve says, and this is how I do it. Do you enjoy it?
Friri says, yeah.
Eve says, all right then. Eve kisses.
Picahota says, mark me blue.
Eve says, enjoy.
Friri says, enjoy Eve. Picahota says, and I am back to red.
Untouchable Heart says, LMAO. Poor Pika.
Chrissy says, first person I see go against Eve like this, no clue what she ever did to you. But Eve doesn't have an ego, she has her opinion, sure, but she will also shut it most of the time.
Untouchable Heart says, math is hard, I guess.
Picahota says, Misty plays ping pong with me. Friri says, all good, I'm just a troll apparently.
Eve says, well, you still have perky boobs. So.
Friri says, I'm sorry if I have hurt Eve.
Eve says, we don't mind.
Friri says, and I apologize about it.
Eve says, okay then.
Tessa says, oh, so games are over for the day? Misty says, it is like building on shifting sand. Danielle Sparky Queen 1 to red.
Eve says, is all good.
Raylan says, Judah hit start and worry about it next round.
Eve says, Pers doesn't cheat.
Chrissy says, Eve is no snowflake, she can handle it, but no need to talk shit for no reason either. Misty says, mark teams.
Eve says, is all I was saying. Except that. Untouchable Heart says, not even a thought, Eve laughing out loud. Eve says, we are all good.
Raijin says, I cheat for her.
Mila says, it must be a pain in the ass to host here, thanks Misty.
Untouchable Heart says, I would quit this game before I ever even thought to. Cheating is not winning.
Friri says, I know what I saw, all good. Misty says, starting in 5.
Untouchable Heart says, haha rage. You saw and proved nothing. As always.
Friri says, sure pal.
Raijin says, prove my cheat.
Untouchable Heart says, laughing out loud. I'm going to try and cheat harder.
Raylan says, it's that damn dress maybe? To distracting?
Eve says, lol.
Raijin says, you want boob next. Damn, Raylan, you distract me.
Untouchable Heart says, all Ray's fault.
Raijin says yes.
No, thank you.
Eve says, he is sexy man.
Raylan says, yep, totally blame your ass in that dress for that Raijin. Laughing out loud.
Misty says, starting in 5. Chrissy says, just sit on his face purse, it will make everything make sense.
Raijin says, laughing out loud.
Untouchable Heart says, finally, they STF you.
No, thank you.
Freery says, oh, we lost laughing out loud. Sorry.
Raijin says, shut up.
Freddy says, Jaja sorry.
Eve says, it's okay to be afraid. We understand.
Freery says, no, I'm just dumb, but all okay.
Raijin says, no, you're just a pain in the ass.
Freery says, why?
Raijin says, ask yourself.
Eve says, because you accused good players of cheating. Untouchable Heart says, it's okay. Eve says, I understand it is hard to come to a place you don't understand. Untouchable Heart says, they can't handle the heat. Eve says, but don't think you are better. When you are new, that is your main issue.
Freery says, I put the logs and yes, I think she cheated.
Eve says, if you get over that. Untouchable Heart says, no thanks. Eve says, we would be fine. Untouchable Heart says, have you seen the lag here? Laughing out loud.
Raijin says, you not have proof in a sim, where's tail lag?
Mila says, it's easy, I suspect everyone better than me as a cheater.
Eve says, lol. Untouchable Heart says, yes.
Chrissy says, Eve, it's how you were 10Y ago, they're better than you so they must be cheating. It's Panther mentality 101 laughing out loud.
Raijin says, Sa, shut up your fucking mouth.
Untouchable Heart says, it's fine. I wouldn't die so much if I was a cheater laughing out loud. And miss so many arrows.
Misty says, starting in 5. Freery says, calm down, she hit me twice in a second and a third time the second previously, but all okay. I said ban her or whatever, I just put the logs.
Untouchable Heart says, it's short melee.
Moron.
Freery says, I never insulted you.
Eve says, and yes, I will admit.
Admit.
Misty says, cut out the drama.
Eve says, I though this way once. But I did learn better.
Misty says, no more insults. Let's just play the game.
Untouchable Heart says, it just shows the lack in brain power laughing out loud.
Spartacus says, we're our PPL.
Picahota says, vie for a games. Freery says, inflatable ego, you just prove something bad about yourself, but all okay, it's funny.
Raylan says, bye Pika.
Eve says, I dunno. I think of human beings like light.
Freery says, of course.
Eve says, lol.
Freery says, and some of the filthy ones like to insult the others, tongue sticking out.
Raylan says, in Frurl, nothing you have described or said shows anyone actually cheating. That's the funny part. You can absolutely legally hit someone 3 times in under 2 seconds and twice in the same second.
Eve says, you accused people of cheating. What do you think would happen? Untouchable Heart says, it's one of Alexney's 50 outs. Laughing out loud. Eve says, maybe.
Friri says, Raylan, I told you I may be a bad bow but a good sword. You experienced it. So yes, Thart was not normal and sorry to call it out.
Eve says, if not.
Misty says, mark teams.
Eve says, I hope whomever you are, you get a grip.
Raijin says, oh, better him not know what's in happen because I think today is his lucky day.
Untouchable Heart says, good sword. You only got 1 hit and missed 2. Laughing out loud.
Raijin says, laughing out loud.
Untouchable Heart says, 1 more, Misty.
Misty says, starting in 5.
Untouchable Heart says, then back to work.
Pikahotas says, Friri, you cannot rely at logs here. They late so you can see several previous hits under short time in logs. They are not reliable in lags. Friri says, I really don't acre about what you say, inflatable ego.
Poof! Bitch, be gone!
Skinny penis. It's your boy. More passion, skinny penis.
More passion, more energy, more energy, more footwork, more footwork, more footwork, more passion.
It's your boy. Skinny. It's your boy. Somebody's watching me, and I know the price.
I need some cheese, potatoes, and olives, and maybe
Raylan says, Rajin got caught in a washing machine that time. Rajin says, yes, bad people.
Birgit says, tourism for the fun guys. TC.
Eve says, well, the thing is Friri.
Tessa says, GTG was fun.
Untouchable Heart says, Misty bans people for less.
Rajin says, LMAO.
Untouchable Heart says, then what has been displayed today? Eve says, you will be hard-pressed to find any better fighters in Gore these days. Untouchable Heart says, so maybe they in cahoots. Eve says, and you had the privilege of playing with them. Just lose and learn. You will get better someday.
Misty says, starting in 5.
Eve kisses.
Rajin says, thank you for the game, Misty. Oh, okay.
Misty says, smiley face.
Mila says, thanks for hosting Misty and all for the fun.
Spartacus says, chow here. He want join.
Friri says, thanks, Misty. Friri says, and thanks all.
Drive says, I'm getting abused.
Spartacus says, if you're fighting 6 versus 6, you must first stay together and fight. Only carry the flag after all the enemy is dead. Not everyone needs to rush off to different places. Open fight like in raids. Then the flag.
Misty says for Daniel.Giordano to blue. Daniel says, okay. Misty says, mark teams. Starting in 5.
Spartacus says, we are 3.
Misty says 3v3 now.
Spartacus says, okay.
Misty says starting in 5.
Spartacus says, Arco, don't you know English? Anyway, thanks for accept. Good night. Arco says, I know English. I was running.
Daniel says run Forrest run.
Spartacus says, good job. And we fight. They 3 we are 2 and lose. Smiley face, I told you. I tell him, don't run for the flag. Follow us. We'll fight first, and if we win, then run for the flag. But the man still leaves us for the flag.
Freery says back. Misty says go easy on him. He is very new to Gore and Second Life. Friri says, all good, Arco. Misty says, he does understand, but English is not his native tongue.
Arco says, am I fight, well, any improvement?
Misty says, asterisk tongue.
Arco says, I know English, but sometime I was as running.
Misty says 2v2 now. Mark teams. Friri says waiting. Chrissy says, put her on red. Misty says starting in 5.
Arco says, "What the hell, I was stuck, can't run."
Socrates says, Arco, why are you running to your own base instead of fighting?
Chrissy says, wasn't lag or anything, the sim has been behaving today. Misty says, starting in 5.
Socrates says, you can't win the round unless you kill the person carrying the other flag.
Arco says, I think we finished. We are only two.
Chrissy says it has been 2v2 for 3 rounds now, I think. Misty says, I call it a day for capture the flag now. Thanks all for coming, smiley face. And thanks especially to the diehards, smiley face. We are done. Freery says, thanks, Misty.
Arco says, yes, it very interesting, much learned for me.
Freery says, want to Sapra, Arco? Fair.
Arco says, yes.
Freery says, nice, wait a bit.
Arco says, basically I want to learn.
Daniel says, okay. Freery says, I am the best, all good. Daniel says, good night. Chrissy says, night all.
Arco says, yes, you're the best.
Misty says, have fun with the spar. Smiley face.